Hello and welcome to a Considered Normal video. My name is Matthew Koster, and today we're going to be installing VirtualBox. VirtualBox is used to basically test out some operating systems before you blow away your machine and put that operating system on there onto actual hardware. So before we do that though, we need to figure out how we're going to run this. So basically, in order to run VirtualBox, you should have virtualization turned on. Now you don't specifically need it, but if you want to run a 64-bit operating system, you are definitely going to need to have virtualization turned on. So to do that, I do have two links here. They will be stored in the comments of the video or in the blog, depending on where you're viewing this. And if you have an ROG, there's a different URL for it because it doesn't go by VTX or AMD-V. It's actually SVM mode. And it took me a while to figure this out on my own ROG board. Once we're done that, you'll also need to have a bit of requirements for it for running virtual machines. You're going to want to have at least 8 to 16 gigs on your machine. 16 gig plus is recommended but not required. That's if you want to run more than one virtual machine at a time. If you want to create a lab or some sort and run 2 or 3 machines, you're going to want to have more RAM. For CPU, you want to have a recent Intel or AMD, 4-core or more. The more the better. The reason why I say that is every time you boot up a virtual machine, it's going to take some of those cores and dedicate it to that virtual machine. For the hard drive, VirtualBox itself takes 30 to 40 gigs. We'll use another 30-40 gigs for each flavor of Linux you're going to be installing today. We're going to be installing 4 flavors. We're going to be installing Ubuntu, Kubuntu, Xubuntu, and Fedora. All right. So the first thing you're going to need to do, of course, is this is the motherboard instructions for the ROG, and these are the instructions for most of your common boards, including Acer, Asus, Dell. Most of the common ones are listed here on how to get into the BIOS to set up the virtualization. So once you have virtualization turned on, you're going to want to download VirtualBox. To do this, go to virtualbox.org, click on download, and if you're on Windows, click Windows Host. If you're on Mac, click OS X Host. Linux, why are you here? If you have a Linux box, you already know what you're doing. We're on Windows, or even Solaris, you can do it as well. On Windows, we're going to click the Windows host because we're running Windows 10. And we're going to download it not to the desktop. We're going to download it to Downloads. This is where it should always be going. And as well, if you're doing this for non-business, I'd also recommend downloading the VirtualBox Extensions Pack. This is licensed to personal use and evaluation license. If you're running a business, you need to actually pay for the license for it. This allows you to do special things, including USB 2 and USB 3 devices, VirtualBox RDP, disk encryption, NVE, NVMe, and PXE boot, and a bunch of other things that aren't available with the regular pack. This is not absolutely needed, but I would recommend it if you are using it for personal use, like we are. I'm going to save that at the same spot. Okay, so down here we're going to click on VirtualBox. We're going to install it. I'm going to minimize this in the background, minimize this as well. Actually, just close this. I'll minimize it for now. So basically, just going to come up with the regular install window. We're going to leave all the defaults running. This is where, if you want to create a start menu entry, a shortcut on the desktop, shortcut in your quick launch bar, register file associations. I usually do all of these, except maybe the desktop. I don't want to put it on the desktop. But I do want to have it in the start menu. I definitely want to have it in my quick launch bar, and I definitely want to have it registered with the file associations. This is something else you want to be forewarned as well, that it will disconnect your internet for a brief moment while it installs the networking feature that it has, which is basically the virtual network adapter. So this will briefly interrupt your internet, but not very much. And then you just click install. If you have, I think it's called UAC or AUC, authorized user, something or other, you'll get this pop-up window. There it is right there, user access control, UAC. If you have that enabled on your machines, Windows 7, Windows 10, I believe, have it by default. Just click yes. You do want it to be able to write to your hard drive. And you may hear my cat in the background. That's just him being him. Ignore him. All right. So now that it's finished, we're going to go back down into our downloads that we just downloaded here. And we're going to click on the VirtualBox Extensions Pack. Looks like the pack's already installed because I had this installed already here, folks. I'm just doing a reinstall to show you how to do it. This will basically just allow you to install it. Scroll down, hit the agree button. Again, UAC will kick in, click yes, and then your extension pack is installed. And that's it for installing VirtualBox. Next up, we're going to be installing Ubuntu. We're going to be creating a Ubuntu machine. Then we're going to do Xubuntu, Kubuntu, and of course, Fedora. So stay tuned. So during that last intermission, I actually downloaded the ISOs for the 4 different distros we're going to be looking at today. The links for them will be down in the description or on the blog post, depending again where you're viewing this from. So before the break, I did have this accidentally on cloud infrastructure. We're not doing cloud. We're doing it directly through VirtualBox itself. We're going to click on the new button to create a new machine. And this will give us all of our information, where it's going to be stored. And the first one we're going to install is Ubuntu. All right, so Linux, Ubuntu 64. Again, in order to do 64, you're going to have the virtualization installed. If you don't have virtualization installed, you should still be able to install the 32-bit version. The 64-bit versions will not show up. So if you don't see 64-bit, it's because virtualization is still turned off. All right, so let's go next. This will give us a chance to select the memory. It'll show you how much memory you have in your machine. We're going to go to, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we're just going to do 4096 for now. That's about 4 gigs of RAM. I could go a little bit further, but I want to have more machines on here. They won't all be on at the same time, so I could actually boot that up to 8192. That's about half the RAM. That should be fine. And then do this for each machine, but don't have all the machines running at once. It'll eat up all your RAM. So if you have more, this is why I said that 16 gigs is great. 16 plus is more. So if you had 32 gigs of RAM, you can do 3 8 gig machines, 8 gig RAM machines up and running. But for now, actually, I'm just going to turn it back down to 4096. So I'll have 4 gigs of RAM, just because I am running Windows 10. Windows 10 does take up a bit. Click on the next button. We're going to create a virtual hard disk now. There are 3 options. Do not add a virtual disk. Well, then we wouldn't be able to do anything. Use an external hard disk file. You could do this if you know what you're doing, but most of us will just be creating a virtual hard disk now. It says the recommended size disk is 10 gigs. We're actually going to be using 40 because we do want to install some things eventually. These machines will be used for upcoming tutorials I'm doing for Bash, Bash scripting, and a few other things. So we do want to have some hard drive space on there. So we're going to go and say create the hard drive. We're going to leave it as a VDI, which is the virtual disk image built-in method. There is also VHD, which is universal, and VMDK, which I think is VMware's virtual hard drive. But for now, we're just going to keep it as VDI. We want to keep it dynamically allocated. Now, what this means is, say it's a 40 gig drive, but we only install the operating system. We don't want that file to be 40 gigs. So that takes up 40 gigs of hard drive space. Now, if you have the hard drive space, you could say fixed size, and it will actually be the fixed size. It'll be 40 gigs, and it'll take longer to create. But dynamically, it'll basically increase that file size the more stuff you put onto it, up to a maximum of 40 gigs. So we're going to leave it as dynamically allocated. We're going to leave it where it is. If you have other hard drives, you can change it. I'm just going to leave it on my C drive under my user account, under the VMs, where it puts it. And like I said, I'm going to take this and I'm going to move this up to, now it says 2 terabyte. I don't have a 2 terabyte drive in there. It won't work. It's not like memory where it actually detects how much memory you have. It just says that the maximum you can have is a 2 terabyte drive. We're actually just going to make it to 40 gigs, as I said before. I'm going to say create. Now, it has the machine created, but it's not really ready to go just yet. There are a few things we need to change. One, we have to associate with an ISO, so we actually, when we boot up, it boots up into something. Otherwise, if we start right now, it's just going to tell us that there is no operating system. I'll show you that here in just a few moments. See, it's telling us to select a disk. All right, so we're going to close this here. I want to power off the machine. The other thing we want to do is we want to take a look at the network. If I'm not mistaken, the network is NAT. We don't want to be NAT, we want to be a bridged adapter. Because during some of our tutorials we want to be able to access the machine directly, So we want on the same network that we're on. So we want it to be attached to our network. NAT basically puts itself on its own network and it won't be accessible from anywhere except for the host. And even that could be a bit of a challenge. So we're going to do a bridge adapter. We're going to tell it that we want to connect to our network connection. Don't want to be on Hyper-V, we want to be actually on our internet connection. And everything else should be fine. You can also add multiple adapters if you want to, but for this instance, we really only need one adapter, just like most desktops have only one adapter anyways. So we're going to click OK to that. We're going to go to Storage. And we're going to click on the CD-ROM icon. And we're going to say, actually we're going to click on the CD icon again in the corner here, my apologies. We're going to choose a disk. We're going to go into our downloads. And we're going to click on the Ubuntu ISO. All right, so now that we see that our CD-ROM is now Ubuntu, now we can go and we can click on Start. You'll note some different messages up here that'll happen. This is auto capture keyboard is turned on. This will cause the virtual machine to automatically capture the keyboard. So when your mouse is over this, it'll actually collect the keyboard information. So I've clicked the mouse inside the virtual machine display or press that host key. Basically what that means is once I put my mouse in here, it's locked in here. And this is telling me that just remember to press your host key. In this case, it's my right control button to capture and uncapture at any time. Okay, I don't want to show this message anymore. I'm going to say capture. You'll see my mouse has disappeared, but if I hit the right control button, I now have my mouse back again. Although it still seems to be locked in here somehow. So I'm going to close that. I had to hit right control a few times. Anyway, so right now Ubuntu is checking a few things. I'm going to make this big. Right, so there's no errors found in the ISO. This is normal for Linux. Sometimes you are able to actually bypass that and not check the ISO. It's recommended to at least check it once just to make sure that there was no issues during the download time and that it did check out to be an actual valid ISO. Even the links I gave you that are the official links, sometimes a network glitch can happen and there may be some bits missing, so it's always good to at least check once. Then you never have to check it again, as long as you keep that same ISO. So we're just waiting for it to boot up the installation window here. Just give us a few moments. Now the reason why I'm going through 4 different distros is because the installation process is slightly different between all of them. And I don't remember ever hearing that sound before. All right. So as with any ISO, any of the CDs that you have here, most of them have the ability to try. So if you're on a laptop and you want to basically pop it in and see what it's like, you can actually pop in the ISO or the CD, and you can actually just try it out. It'll basically boot up into a memory version and not write anything to your hard drive of Ubuntu, so you can try it out. We, on the other hand, we're just going to actually just go straight to the install. On the right here, sorry, on the left, you can see all the different languages that you can install in, so pick the language you're most familiar with. I, of course, am going to select English. Click on Install Ubuntu there. Now it's going to ask you for your keyboard layout. My keyboard is a US English keyboard. Hit Continue. What apps would you like to install to start with? There's Normal, which is basically web browser, utilities, office software, games, media player. Or you can just put minimal installation with just web browser and basic utilities. I'm going to be installing the normal installation. I'm also going to be saying download updates while installing Ubuntu. That way it connects to the net, grabs all the information it needs for the latest packages, and then installs them. And I'm also going to say install third-party software for graphics, Wi-Fi, hardware, and additional media formats, just because it's available. You really don't need to have that, but it adds some, I don't know what to call it, extra stuff that you may need that you don't have to install after, especially media formats. All right, so we're going to hit Continue. few moments. All right, so that's going to ask you what do you want to do with your installation. So we want to actually erase the disk and install Ubuntu. Now you can't go into the advanced features. I like using LVM. We'll go over this more in later videos. And you can also at this point encrypt the new installation for security if you want to. We're doing this through a virtual machine, you don't have to, but if you do it on a laptop and you're worried about security, you may want to encrypt your drive. And now we're going to install. So basically comes with another window here saying that if you continue, the following changes will occur. So we're going to create a root partition as well as a swap partition. These are just defaults. There is a way to go ahead and I might be doing a, if there's enough call for it, I will do an advanced installation where we go in there and create our own partitions, especially in the LVM system. Go and create our own partitions, including like a home partition, a boot partition. But most defaults, it ends up being just a root partition and a swap partition. I'm going to hit continue because we do agree to that. Where are we? Well, I am currently in Montreal, but Montreal is not an option on here. It defaults to Toronto. That's fine. It's Eastern Standard Time. Hit continue. And this is where you pick your username and your password. So I'm going to put in my name here. By Matthew. Oh, computer name. So my username is going to be Matthew. Let's just make it simple. No, it's going to say week. Okay. Trying to make sure there's a strong password. So a strong password consists of uppercase, lowercase, special characters, and numbers. And that's basically a strong password. More than 8 to 12 characters. It's kind of hard to create passwords that big, I know, but if you want your machine to be safe, you really do need to have a strong password. Don't use anything like your parent's name, your child's name, your family, your brother's name, your last name, your first name, your birth date of your kids, birthday of your wife, birthday of your father. None of those things. Completely random if you can. And again, like I said, use uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and special characters. I'm going to require my password to log in. If it is your machine, you're the only one who's ever has access to it, there is a login automatically option, which basically once you boot up, you're in. I would highly recommend against that, but the option is there for you if you wish to. So we're going to leave it as required password to log in. I'm going to hit continue. Now comes the installation process. This is where I recommend you go get a coffee, take a bio break, call the girlfriend, call the wife, have a good chat. It does take some time. I'm just going to quickly pop this open here. And unfortunately, it doesn't show very much, but it does show that it is doing stuff in the background. It's going to copy the files and it's going to install. And then, of course, like I said, take a coffee, go for a bio break. This does take a little while. And we're done installing. Okay, so now that the installation is complete, we're going to need to restart our machine. We may need to kick out the optical drive here. Should ask us to. Right. Please remove the installation media, then press enter. So you go under devices, optical drives, and looks like it actually already removed it. Remove disk from virtual drive. Okay, so that's fine. Let's hit enter. It should be booting up our Ubuntu. This is normal, by the way. You'll get those errors. It's okay. It's normal. Or at least it's normal for me. I've seen it all the time every time I boot up a virtual machine. If you don't see those, great. Could be part of your hardware. But on my hardware, it always gets those errors. You can always hit escape at this point here. Just click in there. Oh, normally it'll show you the back end as to what's going on, but I think I may have missed it. All right, so we're back into Ubuntu and that's it. No, it's not. As you can see, it's a very small screen compared to the rest of my screen. I got a whole bunch of space around here and this is really tiny. I don't want to deal with that. I want it to be a little bit better. So let's fix this. So we're going to log in. Get my password right. You could click here. I'm not going to. But this will... Actually, let me type in a wrong password. You click this. It'll show you what your password is. Okay? That's very, very good for if you may have mistyped it. You think you may have mistyped it. But don't do it if there's somebody around you, because then they will see whatever you typed in for your password. All right, I'm going to hit enter to log in. Now what we need to do is we need to install the VirtualBox guest editions. That's going to basically do a few things for us, okay? It's going to create easy mouse pointer integration. It's going to have an easy way to share folders between the host and the guest. There's a drag and drop feature, allows you to copy or open files between the guest and the host. There's better video support, better time synchronizations between the guest and the host. There's also some standard host and guest communication channels. So we're going to skip this. This is if you have any of these. If your Google account, you can assign them. We don't want to do that here. I'm just going to skip that. Live patch again, up to you. I don't normally. Again, no, don't send system info. I prefer my privacy. Turn off location services. I think it's already off by default. Perfect. If you want to have location services, if you're on like a tablet or something like that, maybe not for a desktop. And away we go. Here's a bunch of software that we could possibly install. Visual Studio Code I'd recommend for sure. Everything else is up to you guys. I've used Slack in the past. I've used VLC. I've used Plex. I've used OBS. In fact, I'm using OBS right now. You'll see down here. OBS, I'm recording it with this. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. I use Discord as well. So you can open up software now if you want to. That's not the point of this video. Software updater. Updated software has been issued since 20 was released. We're going to do this a different way. Okay, you can hit install now, fine, but we want to do this a different way because we want our screen to be big. There's a certain way of installing this, and we're going to go through that. Just give me a few moments here. Just have to plug in my phone so that it stops going out on me because I'm using it as a different screen for me for my notes. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to go to Activities, Terminal. We need to go into the terminal, all right? One of my first tutorials is going to be on how to use this very effectively. But right now, we're going to install a few things to make sure that we can install the VirtualBox guest editions. And this will be the same for all the Ubuntu flavors, so Ubuntu, Xubuntu, Kubuntu. It works for all of those. Okay, so as it says at the top, to run a command as administrator, user root, you need to use the sudo command. All right, so we're going to sudo apt update. Enter your password. Now, we had selected to update Ubuntu while we're installing, and I don't know why it didn't do that. It should have, but it didn't. All right, so next we're going to do a sudo apt upgrade. Give me 269 packages. It's going to do 20.2 megs of additional disk space will be updated. Hit Y to continue. And hopefully this won't take too long. You may want to take another bio break, grab another coffee, because basically it's going to download and install a whole bunch of software that needs to update. Again, with only being 20 megs, it shouldn't take too long. So progression is going a little bit slow. It's only at 7%. So definitely go grab another coffee, take another bio break, call the wife, call the girlfriend, call the boyfriend, call the husband, whatever you want to do. It'll be about 5 or so minutes. All right. We are just nearing the end of this. We will need to do a reboot, but the step after that, which we're going to run, you only need to do if you're running VirtualBox. If you're running this on actual hardware or through VMware, VMware you might actually do it too. It's a different settings, maybe a difference, but same sort of thing. But if you're doing it on hardware, be it a desktop or a laptop, you really don't need to run that next command. We are going to reboot here. Give it a few seconds to kick in. This will basically apply all those updates that we did, especially if there's a kernel update. You need to reboot for that kernel to take effect. And we need it to take effect because some of the things you're going to be doing will be applied to the kernel. Now I'm going to try and see if, there we go, hit the escape button at the right time. Instead of showing your Ubuntu screen, it came up with all that text, which is basically what's going on in the back end. It's good to see if it's stalling for any reason or whatever's going on. If you hit the escape button, you can actually see what step it's stuck on, which is really great. So as you can see, we're still stuck in this very little box. I'm going to log back in again here. Give it a few moments to kick in. All of these times will vary differently depending on your hardware, your CPU speed, the amount of RAM you have, even if it's on a physical hard drive or a virtual or SSD type hard drive or an NVMe drive. All those things will partake in how fast this process is. So let's go and look for terminal again. We're going to need our terminal up. I'm actually going to click it and drag it to the side here because we are going to be using it a lot. Just going to click on terminal here. So the next command we need to do is we need to install Build Essentials DKMS Linux headers as well. So to do that, you type in sudo apt install build dash essential ekms Linux headers $ in bracket uname -r. Now I'll explain this in a later tutorial, but basically what I'm doing is I'm basically installing the headers with I'm executing a command behind that. So let me just quickly click on another terminal here. Can I do that? I can do plus here though, right? Yeah, okay. So uname -r gives me the version of the kernel that I'm running, generic kernel that I'm running. So basically what I'm telling my other tab here to do is to install Linux headers dash 5.4.0 -56 generic. Okay, so that's what that command does. Hit enter, type in your password. Be good if I could actually type. My apologies there, folks. Hit yes to install that. Now this will not install the guest editions in itself. This is just preparing your machine to allow the guest editions to install. This will take just a few moments to go. Good news is we don't have to reboot afterwards. We just need to install the guest editions. Just wait for this to finish at 99%. All right, so it's done. Now we're going to go into Devices, Insert Guest Edition CD Image. And yes, we want to run it. This is the Guest Editions installation media. And we're going to say run. We need to authenticate ourselves, so type in your password again. Now it's going to build the modules it needs for the guest editions. See here, it's now building the modules for the kernel 5.4.0-56 generic, which is what I showed you in the other screen, right? This shouldn't take too long. It's usually quite quick. It's not as long as updating, which can take quite a while sometimes. It's just going to generate some of the boot files. Right, so it is done. Hit return to close the window. So what we're actually going to do is we're not going to reboot. We're actually going to shut it down here quickly. Actually, let's just go and... The reason why we're shutting down is we're going to enable Oh, yes. There we go. Shutdown -H now. We use to halt. Dealing with Windows too much. Okay, so we have Ubuntu, and now what we want to do is we actually want to go into the properties of this, go into settings, and under advanced, here we go. So this is where your snapshot folder is. We can actually share the clipboard bidirectional, drag and drop bidirectional, and that allows you to copy files back and forth. And if you're in there, you find something you want to copy out of, you can go Control C and then Control V somewhere else on your actual host. Okay, and then just start it back up again, and now it should go into a more easily visible mode. It won't for the first bit once it's booting this. But once it gets to the actual video part, it should go full screen. If not, I know of a way to fix it. Hit escape, see what's going on. Log in. Wait a few moments for it. And it didn't go full screen. There we go. Okay, so I had to do a Control F, right Control F, which makes it full screen, and then come out of that, and now I have my full screen. I have my stuff at the top here, but I usually like just to go full screen itself. I'll give you this warning here saying, you know, the right control is your host key, so the host plus F or control full screen will make it back and forth, or make it so it's full screen. Note the menu bar is hidden in full mode. You can access it by pressing host home. So if I go control home, I'll be able to see the actual menu that you normally saw up top. All right, so that is now Ubuntu. This is GNOME, which is the interface that Ubuntu has by default. In order to exit this here, you can do your shutdown. If you want to minimize it and access your host machine, you can through this little button here, the little underscore, and that minimizes it. I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to do a Control F to bring it out of full screen, at which point I can move it, shrink it down, and I can move things around. For instance, I can go into Firefox here. I'm going to copy the text. Going to open up Notepad. This is now on my host Windows machine, and I can paste it in. I can also copy from here, or just copy Firefox, and I can paste into there. So now we have a full version of Ubuntu installed with the guest additions. Next up, we are going to install, you can also turn this off, don't show this message again. We are now going to install Xubuntu, which is the next edition of Ubuntu-based operating systems we're going to install. Pretty much the same sort of thing, but the interface will be different because Xubuntu uses XFCE4 as the interface as opposed to GNOME. So what you see here will be different, as well as the installation looks a little bit different as well. So stay tuned. We're going to do that next. Okay, so just before the break, we had installed Ubuntu, which you'll see here, it's now powered off state. We're going to create now a Xubuntu install. So we're going to again click the new button at the top here. We're going to call this Xubuntu. There's many ways of pronouncing Ubuntu. It's Ubuntu. I call it Ubuntu. But the real official way of saying it is Ubuntu. I just find it sounds really strange because I've always called it Ubuntu, and I've been dealing with Ubuntu since it first came out. And you can order the CDs online for free. So I have years and years and years of the habit of calling it Ubuntu. I apologize. That is not the correct way to pronounce it. It is Ubuntu. It just sounds really weird for me. I apologize. Okay, so we are going to install Xubuntu. It's going to go into our VMs. It is Linux, and we're going to leave it as Ubuntu 64 because there is no Xubuntu option, but it is Ubuntu based. All right, so we're going to click next on that. Again, we're going to say we only want to have 496 megs of RAM. We're going to create the virtual hard drive now. We're going to leave it as VDI, virtual disk image. We're going to dynamically allocate the space. We want it to be 40 gigs in size. Again, if you have the hard drive space, you can definitely create any size you want, but for our display purposes and for the purposes of these videos, we only need to have 40 gigs. You're going to create that. Now again, we have our settings created, but we want to make sure that we're on the same network. Make it a bridge adapter. Because remember, NAT will make it so that you can only access it from the host, but not very easily. It basically just goes through the host. Bridge means it'll be on the same network as you, so it'll be able to give an IP address on the same network as your host machine. So you can easily telnet or SSH into it and be able to access it remotely. That's it for that. And we're going to go into the storage. And we are going to click on the CD-ROM icon. Click on the CD-ROM icon again. We're going to not choose Ubuntu this time. We're going to choose a different disk. We're going to choose Xubuntu. Click OK. And we're going to start her up and start the installation process for Xubuntu. Don't know why it didn't allow me to start from it. Hopefully it's not a bad image. Looks to be okay. It has these icons down here, so it should be okay. Again, we're going to go full screen on this. Also note, you don't have to have this open in the background. You can close this and it won't affect your installation. So this is going to check the installation pool here and see to make sure everything's okay. This is actually the Ubuntu flavor that I most enjoy. I stopped using Ubuntu back in version 12 because they got rid of Unity and they went back into a GNOME, and I didn't like the way that it looked. And then I basically got rid of Ubuntu for a very long time until my friend introduced me to Xubuntu. So no errors were found, which is good. Now going to boot us into our installation program. Eventually, here we go. Again, you have the option to try, pick your language, and we're going to install. Again, English keyboard. You can also use the detect keyboard. And it'll tell you to hit a couple of keys, and then it'll tell you what keyboard you have. In North America, most of us use the English US keyboard. Click on Continue. Again, download updates while installing Xubuntu. I don't know why it doesn't actually do this, or it didn't for Ubuntu. Again, we're going to click on the Install Third Party for Graphics, Wi-Fi, Hardware, Additional Media Formats. You notice this is slightly different than you did for Ubuntu. This is the same sort of thing here. Advanced features. I'm going to use LVM again. I'm not going to encrypt. There is the advanced option. Again, I won't be covering that here. This is just for basic testing. But there is an advanced option to create different partitions that you want to have. Click on Install Now, and it should come up and tell you what's going to change, just like the other one did. All right, it's going to create an LV root and LV swap one. These are logical volumes. Logical volume manager. So volume group is Ubuntu, or VGX Ubuntu, or sorry, VG for volume group, which is volume group Xubuntu, and then the logical volume is root, and logical volume swap one. Continue on that. Again, we are in Toronto, actually Montreal, but Montreal is not an option here. As you can see, only Toronto is. Again, type in your name. And your password. All right, again, you have the option to log in automatically, but I recommend that you require a password to log on to keep your information safe. Now the setup was very, very similar to Ubuntu. Sometimes they're not. I guess with the version 20.04, they tried to standardize it. We'll take a look and see what Kubuntu looks like. But when I installed these with version 16 a little while back, they were completely different installation types, installation programs. So go ahead, take your bio break. Like I said, get a coffee, take a bio break, call your wife, call your girlfriend, call your boyfriend, call your husband, call your children, call your parents. Have a good conversation. This is going to take a while, especially since we said we're going to install all the third-party software. It does take a while. We're going to probably have to do this again twice because we have to update later on to get those guest editions installed, just like we did for Ubuntu. So, take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, so the installation is now complete. We need to reboot our machine. Click Restart Now. Again, these error messages you'll find are typical. There's nothing wrong with your machine. That normally happens. So I'm going to take a look and see if it removed the... And it did. It removed the disk from the drive for us, thankfully. Just hit Enter to restart. So you hit the escape button to see what's going on in the background. This will look familiar to you if you remember what we did with Ubuntu. Ubuntu did the same sort of thing. Now the login screen is going to look a little bit different. Going to log in. The interface is a little bit different than it is for Ubuntu. Again, this is XFCE4. You're going to see that there's no menu down the side. All your stuff is underneath the little mouse at the top here. We're going to go down into System. Nope, not System. Ooh, this is good, interesting. Here, where is... Terminal is supposed to be under one of these. Probably going to be under accessories. Yes, under accessories is terminal emulator. Or you can just type up here, term. You can go to XFCE terminal, just the regular terminal emulator. Either one doesn't really matter at this point. So again, we're going to need to do those sudo commands. We're going to go sudo update. Enter our password. Of course, update is not a command. It's apt update. Let that run for a few moments, see if there's any updates. Now, it did show that it was installing the same kernel as we installed for Ubuntu. So I don't think the kernel itself was updated. We're just going to double check and see here. So there is 215 packages to upgrade. I still recommend upgrading it, but I don't think we'll need to reboot. We will anyways, but I don't think the kernel is going to be updated. So we're going to do just a few different things here. First, check out the kernel. The kernel is 5.4.0-56, which I believe is the exact same as the last kernel for Ubuntu. But we'll run our commands in the same order we did. So, sudo apt upgrade. This will start the upgrade process. There's going to be 18 megs this time. Last time it was 20 megs. We're going to click yes to that. I'm just scanning through here to see, and I do not see the kernel in there. So we're going to hit no to that just now. Actually, no, we're going to hit yes, right? Yes. We're going to run it. We're not going to reboot though, but we are going to install the kernel updates that we did, the build essential, the DKS, the Linux headers based on that particular kernel. We're going to install that, and then we're going to reboot. Or actually, no, not even that. I think we'll just go and directly install the guest editions, and then we're going to shut down, enable the bidirectional copy and paste clipboard and the file transfer, and then we're going to boot up, and then we're going to make it so it's the right size. So again, this is going to take just a few more moments there, folks. So again, by all means, take a bio break quickly if you wish, and we'll be back in just a few moments. And we're back. So seeing a muffin there. All right, so now we're going to quickly run. Let's just make sure. Okay, so it does say 5.6, perfect. We are going to install our build essentials. DKMS and our Linux headers. And as before, we're going to execute a bit of code. So it seems it did perform a lot of updates, update the kernel and everything, but there were some other applications that need to be updated. It still should have done that during the installation process, and I'm not sure as to why it does not do that. Something to do with the installer, I assume. Okay, so now that that's installed, we're going to go into the devices. We're going to say insert guest edition CD image. So the CD was mounted successfully. It doesn't give us the run command like it did before for the other one. I'm just trying to figure out which one we need to run. I believe it's, no, that's an exe. Whoops. Where are we here? Okay, so we're going to go to the media here. We're going to say run as root. Really? Okay, then we're going to try instead Linux editions.run. Run that as root. That should do it for us. Now it's building the modules. Now up here to get this here, when I said .vbox, I hit tab twice and it gives me all the possible options of any file that starts with vbox. This is something I'm going to be teaching you if you come back for our bash tutorial, which I'll be doing sometime within the next little while. Just wait for this to complete. Again, this doesn't take, excuse me, this does not take too long. See, we're already done. We're going to shut down the computer, or the virtual machine, sorry. We're going to go into the settings, under advanced, and we're going to turn on bidirectional, drag and drop bidirectional clipboard. Then we're going to start her back up. And again, she may not go full screen on us again, but we know how to fix that. Give it a few moments here to kick in. Hit the escape button, make sure everything loads okay. These should all say okay down the side. If there's something that doesn't say okay, there's something that needs to be looked into. It rarely happens, but most of the time it's all okay. Log in. With the correct password, of course. And you'll see here again, we're still stuck in this small little square. I believe all you need to do is just readjust your window size. You can hit the Control F, get you into full screen mode. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. You are now in XFCE or Xubuntu or Xubuntu. Again, it just sounds so weird to go Ubuntu. Doesn't roll off the tongue as well as Ubuntu does. So anyways, that is Xubuntu. This is the XFCE4 interface as opposed to GNOME. There was a little bit of differences between putting in the VirtualBox editions. which we had to do it through the console as opposed to the pop-up like I did in Ubuntu. And there was a slight difference in that installation. Not as big as a difference as I thought there was, as I remember there being when I did in 16. This is Ubuntu 20.04. I've done this previously with 16.04, just never published it. But this one I definitely want to publish this video. So the next one we're going to do is Kubuntu, which again is KDE, which is another interface, different interface. They're all Ubuntu based, but they have these as their default install. You can also install Ubuntu and install XFCE and KDE manually. It's just easier for beginners to actually basically just start off with whichever one they want. So we're going to do that in just a few moments. Stay tuned, and we're going to install Kubuntu. Previously, we installed Ubuntu and Xubuntu, and now we're going to take a look at our last Debian-based flavor of Ubuntu, which is Kubuntu. So we're going to take a look at creating a new machine. We're going to call this Kubuntu. Again, it's Linux, it's Ubuntu based, so we're going to leave these settings in. You notice that these automatically update. If I typed in Windows, it's going to tell me it's Windows. If I go 10, it tells me it's Windows 10. So it automatically selects from what you're typing in here. Right? So you'll see now that there's only Windows in this area because the type says Microsoft Windows. If you go to Linux, which is what we're going to be installing, you have Oracle, Red Hat, OpenSUSE, Turbo, Ubuntu, Xandros, and other Linux. We're just going to stick with the Ubuntu. It recognizes that Ubuntu's in the name, so it's going to say, oh, that's Ubuntu 64 flavor. We're going to click Next. Again, we're going to use only 4 gigs of RAM for this. Create a virtual disk. Keep it as a VDI. Dynamically allocated. We're going to again bump that up to 40 gigs. Say create. Now again, we have our Ubuntu framework sort of thing. We're going to change that network. I'm going to bring up to a bridge adapter. I'm going to go into storage. We're going to click on the empty CD-ROM tray. We're going to tell it we're going to choose a disk, and we're going to install Kubuntu. So now it says Kubuntu is the drive now, which is great. One of the other things I wanted to show you here as well, for base memory, processor. Currently, we're only using one CPU. And if you remember back at the intro, I had said that you wanted to have 4 core or more. I actually have a 6-core system, which considers to be 12 CPUs or 12 threads. I can actually go and I can say, well, I want the system to be a little more powerful. I want it to have 4 CPUs, which is actually 2 cores of my system, 4 threads in total, because it considers each CPU as being a single thread. This will make the system a little more powerful, but for now, we're just going to leave it as one processor. All these settings can be changed at a later time. So we have our storage set up, we have our network set up. We're going to click OK on this, and we're going to start up the system. Again, for some reason, it doesn't understand why it's not selecting the drive that I had put there, but okay. Again, you may hear my cat in the background. He's just testing his vocal cords like he does every day. And I love him for it. Anyways, let's just minimize this in the background. Open this up wide. What do you want, buddy? Chico, 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 Chico. What do you want, bud? I'm recording. I'm recording. Where'd you go? Grr. Okay, enough playing with the cat. We're still waiting for the scan to complete. This again is checking the image for errors. You can hit Control-C to cancel the check, but again, like I said, you always want to check it at least just once, just to make sure that something didn't get corrupted during the download process. This is almost done now. It's almost at 87, 88, 89. We're looking at almost 99% here. It'll be done. There we go. No errors found. Great. All 3 of our images end up being just fine. Now it's going to boot into, again, hitting escape. You can take a look and see what's going on in the background. It's going to finish booting up and go into our installation application. or the option to pick whether you want to test it or install it and choose your language. Give it a few moments there to kick in. It does take some time. Again, the time depends on whether you're on an NVMe drive, a physical drive, a SSD, or a solid state drive, depending on how good your CPU is, how good your RAM is. All those are limiting factors that could make this take a little bit longer. And even with my system being as beefy as it is, I only say that because it's I'm running a Ryzen 5 chip, first generation, and only 16 gigs of RAM. So it's not exactly the most powerful machine, but it is a good machine. So again, this is just a little bit different looking than the others. In fact, down here you'll see some of it gets cut off. Not well designed. That should be down there. This should take not very long. I don't know. If you're ready, you can install Kubuntu alongside or instead of your current operating system. The alongside is called dual booting. That's something that I may look into in another video, where you can actually install both operating systems on your hard drive. You only access one at a time, mind you, but that way at least you can keep your Windows system. So again, instead of being on the left-hand side where you can select your language, it's actually right in the center. You have the option to try Kubuntu or install, and we are going to install it. Again, we are installing the 20.04 versions. My keyboard is the regular US keyboard. I do not like that I have to do that. Can I shrink this any? Trying to get my mouse in the right spot. No, I can't shrink it. So if you get into this and you see only that, you may want to just move the Kubuntu installer over. This is sadly very nuts. I don't have wireless installed. Software, normal software. See, this option, normal and minimal, was not installed, was not in Xubuntu. The option to download updates and install third-party was, but this is only in Ubuntu, and Kubuntu was not in Xubuntu. That was that one difference that I was talking about. So again, we want normal installation. We're going to download updates, which again doesn't really work for some reason, but we want to do it anyways. And install third-party software and graphics because we want to have some of those extra things just in case. We got 40 gigs of hard drive space. It won't take up that much. So we have hit next on this. We're just waiting for it to come to the disk setup. Give it a few moments. So this is slightly different. Again, we are going to guided, but use the entire disk. You can do manual if you want to, but I highly recommend it in this case. Do the guided using the entire disk and set up a logical volume manager, or you can do encrypted if you wanted to. This does show a nice little diagram as to what it's going to look like afterwards. Well, the drive has absolutely nothing, so it's going to be all Kubuntu. So again, if you continue, it's going to create an LV root and an LV swap. So now it's VG Kubuntu or volume group, and this is logical volume root, logical volume swap. Yes, we want that to happen. We are going to select Canada. Time zone is not Atlantic. Toronto time, that's fine. Looks like it's already formatting the drive for me, which is nice. And this is where you get to pick your username. So again, as always, this I'm going to change to, so we always know where we are. Gotta make sure I type it right both times. Doesn't tell you if it's a good or strong password or if they're the same, like the other ones do. I do want to require my password again. You can have it log in automatically if you wish, but I do find this is a little bit safer. That way only you have access to your files and that's it. Now it's time for another coffee break, except here I can't open it to see what's going on. It's It's one of those differences between the installations. So again, as I said, take yourself a little bit of a coffee break, bio break, call the wife, husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, significant other, children, parents, best friend, enemy, whatever. You're going to be here for a while. Okay, so now we're done installing. We're going to need to restart the machine. So we're just going to take a look here and see. Devices, optical drive, it was removed, of course. Hit the enter button. Give it a few minutes to reboot. Then we're going to do, an update. Then we're going to install the guest editions. Sorry, that was my phone plugging in. I don't know why it does that, but okay. Woohoo. So again, a different interface altogether. Type in your password. Whoops. Hit an extra key there. So unlike the other two where your menu is at the top, which is very, very easy for those who are coming from the Mac world, if you're coming from the PC world, KDE is probably your most interface. It looks a lot like Windows, where you have your start button in the bottom corner, you have your system tray in the bottom corner, as opposed to Ubuntu and Xubuntu where it was up top, which was quite like a Mac. So again, there are updates available, and for a reason it didn't install. We're going to go into console, and we're going to do our updates. So sudo apt update. Like at all the archives and stuff, find out what files need to be updated. And then we run the command again, but this time we say upgrade. This one here only has 14 megs as opposed to 17 or 20. So a little bit less files to install, but still quite a bit. I did check, and this is, let me just quickly hit no there. If we go uname-r, we get the same 5.4.0-56 generic. So we can actually install a few of the other things as well before we reboot. So let's just go sudo, oops, upgrade. This will make sure our machine is completely up to date. Hit yes button to continue. Again, feel free to go get yourself another coffee, take a bit of a break, tuck the kids in, call your significant other, have a conversation with somebody. This is going to take a little while again. This is one thing with setting up Linux is that it does take time to install, but once it's there, you usually don't have to update all the time. Some people don't update at all. I know a buddy of mine decides that he decides not to update anything. If it ain't broke, why fix? But the problem is there are security fixes that need to be updated. So as long as you have security fixes update on, you should be okay. But I like dealing with updated software. The reason why it's updated is there's been bugs found. Excuse me. Or something was wrong with it. It was causing some issues. So upgrading it is great. However, be forewarned that sometimes upgrades do break other applications. This is why my buddy does not like to update at all. But most of his stuff is on a secure network, so he doesn't have to worry about that. But still, updates take time. So, again, we'll see you in a few moments. If you get this in the middle of your installation, do not hit restart. Wait for it to complete, wait for it to continue. If you restart now, you're in the middle of an update, you could destroy your machine. So be forewarned. As long as this number down here is not 100%, you don't see your regular input prompt here, don't restart. Don't hit this button. Let it go and wait. In fact, I can just close this. We don't need that. We're not worried about that. Just be forewarned. Sometimes something like that will happen. All right, and we're back. So now the last step is to install the Build Essentials, DKMS, and Linux header. So let's go ahead and do that. Go back to sudo apt install build essential, DKMS, and Linux headers, uname-r. Yes to install that. This shouldn't take too long, it just has to build them. Then once this is done, we'll see if we have to just click a button for the VBox extensions to work, the add-ons, or if we actually have to go and do it manually through the console. We'll see in a few moments here. Once this is done, it's 99% complete. There we go. Go to the devices, insert the guest edition box. Wow. Guess it didn't work. So there we are there. Let's go back to here. And I believe I'm not incorrect. It was VBox Linux editions run. This should install our modules for us. So again, we are 5.4.0-56 generic for the kernel version. By the time you see this, that may be a different version, but for this, that's what it is. Always make sure you have the most latest up-to-date version, of course. Excuse me. Give it a few seconds for this, then we'll shut down the machine. Make sure that bidirectional copy and paste and drag and drop are set. Then we'll boot back up, make sure we can stretch the screen. And that will be it for KDE. Let's give it a few more moments here. So see, the kernel modules will not be replaced until the system is restarted. So you're going to have to restart the system anyways. We are going to shut down the system though, shut down -H for halt. We want to do that now. Hit escape, you should see all these things stop. You'll see this every once in a while too, where a stop job is running for something, and so many seconds out of so many minutes. This is because those systems need to wait for something else to shut down first. And it's waiting for 1 minute and 30 seconds. If it does not stop within 1 minute and 13 seconds, it'll stop automatically. It gives it some time to sort of pause and wait for things. And this time here, it's basically a mix between running an Acron job, excuse me, and of course our session 3 for user Matthew, which is me, right? So just give this a few minutes here. There we go. So now it's still trying to shut down me. It's waiting for other things to shut down first. This is why I go to the screen as opposed to this. This tells you nothing. It just sits there, and you might think that you're frozen. Other than the glowing, you don't really understand what's going on in the background. Hit that escape button. You get to see exactly what's happening. Coming up on the 1:15 out of the 1:30. Still trying to close my session. For some reason, it's having an issue doing that. Oh, there we go. It just automatically killed it. So let's go back into our Oracle here. Let's go back into the settings. Go into Advanced. We're going to turn on bidirectional copy paste, bidirectional drag and drop, hit OK, and we're going to start that back up again. Give it a few minutes. You'll see the error splash across the screen. These again are absolutely normal. Again, you hit the escape button to see what's happening in the back. Everything seems to be okay so far. We should see our login screen momentarily. Perfect. Type in your password. And again, all we should have to do is move our screen, bring it back up, and we are full screen. Right? Network connection is activated. We can just close that. Hit Control F or right Control F. Now you're full screen. You don't have any interruptions except for this down here where you can minimize. Now, one of the things I didn't show on the other is your shutdown or leave options. These are all different depending on which system you're on, right? So in this case here, it's down here. Click on leave, and then of course you click shutdown, and that shut down the system. So that's it for Kubuntu, which is KDE. And it was the last of the Ubuntu flavored systems, which are actually based on Debian, which is another distro of Linux. The next one we're going to be installing is Fedora, which is actually based off of Red Hat. These are all desktop, but Fedora totes themselves as being a, what do you call it there? Workstation. That's the word I was looking for. Fedora totes themselves as a workstation, not just a desktop. All right, so we're going to do that next. Please stay tuned. Before we get into Fedora, I just want to do a quick disclaimer. I do run into issues with this particular operating system, and that is because Fedora updates their kernels so quickly that VirtualBox does not have a chance to catch up. So we do run into a few issues with the 5.9 kernel. It's not yet supported by VirtualBox. I also run into some other issues with it, but be forewarned, this is only because it's within VirtualBox. I run the same operating system on a daily basis in a VirtualBox at the office. I'm a Linux administrator by trade, and I do use a Windows machine at the office, but I do use Fedora in a VirtualBox environment there, and it runs perfectly smoothly. But on hardware, it runs absolutely amazing, be it a laptop or a desktop. So don't let the issues that we run into here in this video shy you away from using this operating system, especially if you're running it for a business. This is one of the best operating systems, especially in a corporate environment if you don't want to go with the Windows way. So I just want to basically put together this quick disclaimer. We do run into issues. It is not the operating system's fault. It is the compatibility between the operating system and the virtual environment created by VirtualBox. So with that being said, let's get into the video. In the previous sections of this video, we installed Ubuntu, Xubuntu, and then Kubuntu. And now we're going to install something that isn't Debian based. We're going to install something that is actually Red Hat based. And we're going to install Fedora Workstation 32. 33 is out as of October, but unfortunately I don't think VirtualBox here is up to date with the kernel for it, because unfortunately both editions, both the live net install and the regular workstation, both come up with kernel panics, which are equivalent to a blue screen of death in Windows. So we're going to install the 32 edition instead. So we're going to click New. We're going to type in the name Fedora, and it should automatically select Linux and Fedora for us. We're going to leave it in the basic directory we always had the rest of them in. I'm going to add a little bit more RAM to this one, just because I know that it's a workstation, it's a little bit more involved, has a little more applications. So I want to give it a little bit extra RAM as possible. We're going to create a hard disk. We're going to create it with a VDI. It's going to be dynamically allocated, but instead of 40 gigs like our other VMs, we're going to create this with 80. All right, so now we're going to go back into our network. We're going to tell it that we want it to be a bridge network, just like before. We're going to go into storage. We're going to select this, and we're going to select the 32 version. And we're also going to select the live CD. And I think this is why the previous editions were coming up saying we don't know what to boot from. So when this is checked, virtual disk will not be removed when the guest system ejects. Okay, so no, I don't want that. So we'll try anyways. Okay. And under System, I want to beef up the CPU a bit for this one as well to be 4 CPU instead of 1. And we have enough of that. We have 12 cores that we can use, so I'm going to use 4 instead. All right, so let's boot this up. It may ask us at this point to select what CD you want to select, and it does. So we're going to say Fedora Workstation Live 32 and say Start. And again, we're just going to test this media because it's the first time running it. We want to make sure that it is fully tested and that it did not have any corruption during the download phase. Let's give it a few moments to kick in. Now, there are some benefits and some drawbacks to using Fedora with VirtualBox, of course. With hardware, everything's fine. With VirtualBox, sometimes the video doesn't quite expand. There's some settings we need to change in that. But there are some benefits too, and that is that the VirtualBox guest editions are automatically installed through the operating system itself. You don't have to go in and change it or install it afterwards. So we'll check on that in a few moments. Just going to turn down the volume for my phone here so we don't get the dings all the time. There we go. So again, this is a Red Hat based install. It's Red Hat. So basically the package manager is RPM or Yum. The packages are RPM based. Whereas Ubuntu, the extension on those are usually .debs, and they use apt to install or apt-get in previous versions. They moved it down to apt. Almost complete. There we are. Everything seems to be okay. Looks like everything's going to be okay for the boot up here. Now this is also a GNOME-based distro, just like Ubuntu is. Xubuntu is again XFCE, Kubuntu is KDE, and this is back to the same as Ubuntu as GNOME. There we go. Did take a little bit longer to boot, and you'll find that this particular distro is a little bit slower, I find, in a VM to start, especially if you have lower resources compared to the other ones. You still have the option here to try Fedora or to install. There's no language selection here. Just try and install. We're going to hit the install button. This again takes some time. You'll see it pop up here eventually when it actually does start that. Again, this particular distro is a little bit slower. It's a little bit beefier. It's a bit bigger. And you'll find out later on when we go to update the operating system that does take much longer to update because it's a little bit more involved. All right, so we select our language. We're going to go with English Canada, because I'm from Montreal. Click on the Continue button. This is where you see a lot of differences between the previous installs and this one here, is their install interface is completely different. So we are going to select the drive that we want to have. We can add a disk, we can automatic, custom, advanced builder if we wanted to. We're just going to leave it as the default. We're just going to say done. And that little triangle should disappear from our installation media here. Once it clicks in, there we go. It's saving storage, checking storage configuration, and it goes away. Perfect. Time and date already says Toronto. We'll leave it as that. And we're going to say begin installation. Now you notice it didn't ask for a username or password or the machine name at this point. It does this upon reboot. Now, this is going to take a little bit of time. So again, go grab yourself a coffee, call a loved one, call your boyfriend, your girlfriend, wife, husband, significant other. Go take a bio break. This will be probably about 10 to 15 minutes. See you soon. And we are done. Just click on Finish Installation. Now, what we want to do is we want to actually reboot. It doesn't do it here for us. You can just power off or whatever. We actually want to reboot. So again, go into our terminal and just type in reboot. Give it a few moments. See, that's just stopping everything right now. So you can come back and reboot. And this time we're actually going to, I forgot to remove the disk. And we're going to reset the machine here. Now it should just boot up normally. It shouldn't go to the CD. Give a few moments to interact. Should come up with the Fedora logo very shortly here. There we go. If ever you want to, hit escape to actually take a look and see what's going on. Should go up with the GUI very shortly here. And I should be able to, oh, it didn't. Oh wait, it hasn't fully installed yet. That's right. Remember, this one, unlike the previous Ubuntus, didn't ask for username and password or machine name. In fact, this one doesn't, I don't even think it asked for machine name. I think it just asked for username and password. So we're going to hit next. We're going to turn off the privacy settings, the automatic reporting of problems. We don't need that. You can connect your account if you wish to. I'm just going to skip that. I'm going to put in my name and account name here. Just simple Matthew will do for the username. With Fedora, because it's a workstation software, you can connect it to with an enterprise login, like Active Directory on Windows. So you can have a mix of Windows and Linux machines on your Active Directory login if you use the enterprise login mode. We're not. We're just going to click next. Pop in a password here. Type in again. And away we go. All done. So now we can start using Fedora. Wait for it to load completely because some of the things up here have not loaded yet. And then I'm going to check and see if the VirtualBox Guest Editions is already installed, as it should be. We're going to close the help as we don't need that right now. We're going to open up our terminal. And I'm going to sudo DNF, which is the package manager for this. I could also do yum, and it would work just the same, but the new version is DNF. I'm going to list installed, and I'm going to search for editions. Pop in my password. Look at that, VirtualBox Guest Editions is already installed. We don't need to do anything in regards to installing it from the CD, clicking anything, installing any extra packages. It's already built into it. So you'll notice that we don't have the Control F part here, right? So what I'm going to do first, before anything happens, there's a new version of Fedora available, but I don't want to update to it. I do just want to update the regular files. So again, we're going to look for the terminal. I'll show you here that sudo does work as well. Whoops, put an extra U in there. Put in my password. Because we do want to make sure that our operating system is completely up to date for the version that we're using. And this is version 32, as I said. As you can see here, 32. We want to make sure that since 32 came out, any updates that were created since then will be installed. We don't want to upgrade to 33, as again, 33 seems to have an issue with VirtualBox, which is why I didn't click that upgrade option within the operating system. So that's something you need to note with Fedora, because Fedora does update quite more often than Ubuntu does. In fact, every couple of months they have a new version that comes out. You want to make sure that the version of VirtualBox, once you see a new edition of Fedora, say again Fedora 33, you want to make sure there's an update between the release date and a new version of VirtualBox. So make sure that either one or two versions of VirtualBox come out after the initial release of the Linux distro you want to install, and Fedora edition you want to install. Otherwise, you'll run into some issues. Like I said, there'll be kernel panics and a few of those other things. You don't really have that issue with Ubuntu as much, unless there's a brand new release. Like when 20 came out, version 20 came out right away. VirtualBox hadn't updated yet. You probably would have gotten that same error message. So we're going to be updating everything to FC32. This is basically all the updates that we have. It's not going to update to 33. We're not doing a distro update, just a regular update. It's going to be 1.1 gigs. So we're going to hit yes on this. And it's going to update all those packages. So just be forewarned, unlike the other distros where there's like 17 to 20 megs of updates, this is 1.1 gigs. So it's going to take a while to download and quite a while to install. So, 8th break of the video here. Go ahead, grab yourself your 8th coffee, or call another friend, call your significant other, take a bio break. This one's going to take just a little bit longer than all of the other updates we did previously. All right, so I'm going to speed this up, but go ahead, take yourself a break, and I'll see you in a short while. Okay, we're back. So it should be pretty much almost finished here. It's at 1588 of 1588. But there was something that scrawled just up ahead here, and I wanted to see what it was. Okay, so it's just basically a really, really long directory structure. A couple of files and stuff that are created. It wasn't any errors. That's what I was possibly worried about, was the fact that it might have been an error. So we're just finishing up the last little bit of scriptlets. Because when I left it was at kernel core. There we go, it's done with the rest. Oh, it's still going. No, it's just verifying everything. All right, then it tells you basically what was updated, which is a very, very long list of items. Unless it doesn't tell you the time here. It does tell you the time to download. How long it took to download the 1.1 gig is about 2.5 minutes for me. It'll be longer for yourself, depending on how good of an internet connection you have. I have a 400 meg down. But yeah, so it's completed. The kernel was updated, so I'm going to do a reboot here, but I just want to quickly take a look here and see. If I want to search for additions, type in my password. And it is there, and I think it actually got updated. So let's do a reboot just to make sure that everything's up to date, the new kernel's up to date, the additions is up to date, everything's there, because we want to make sure that we give it its best chance to work as possible. Because again, we're stuck in this little screen, but the additions is installed, so we shouldn't be stuck on that. So let's take a look and see if we reboot here. Give it a few seconds to kick in here. Also, if you did the install and you came back and you move your mouse and you got the login window, just log in with the username and password. It did happen once during the installation. I don't know if you saw that because I had sped up the footage for that. But it did ask me for my username and password to log back in because the download and update time did take quite a long time. So I'm just going to hit escape here. Looks like it may have froze. Fortunately, I didn't escape quick enough to find out where it froze. Just give it a few seconds to see if it's just locked on something and then it'll kick back in. I don't see anything moving down here in regards to the hard drive or anything. Okay, let's reset the machine. So it is still 32, but it is definitely a newer core. So the kernel core was 5.6.6 before. Now it's 5.911. Let's see if we can boot it up with this. Then I'm going to hit that escape button once the logo shows up, and we can see what happens if it actually freezes here. So it looks like the kernel may be an issue again here as well, because it was a newer kernel, it did update. And I don't know if Oracle supports the 5.9 kernel. Again, we'll just give it a few moments. Because it said it started the kernel device. You'll see here it says starting. Oh, can't see my mouse. Starting and then start head. Okay. So we're going to hit that reset button again. And this time we're going to log into the lower core, 566, and see if she boots. Like I said, this is one of the disadvantages of running Fedora core in a VM. It is a very, very powerful operating system on hardware. In a VM, it's pretty finicky. And I know this because I use it on a regular basis. See, it should just see there goes the core. Everything's fine now. So yeah, so it might be just an issue with that particular core. I use this on a regular basis. Virtual guest VGA resize client failed to start. Okay, so there is the part that's failing there, which is interesting. So I don't think it's going to allow me to expand. No. Wait for it to log me in fully. Yeah, it doesn't allow me to. So we're going to ignore that one. That's the regular message. So what we can do here, I'll leave that back on there. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to our terminal. Sudo DNF, DNF. Actually, first let's just go do this here. Okay, so we are in 5.6. So we're going to go to DNF, sudo DNF, remove VirtualBox guest additions. Put in your password. Was it not called that? So let's look it up again. Sudo DNF. Just installed grep additions. Oops, it was dashes. So let's just take this here. Copy that. Sudo DNF remove that there. Yes. And instead of removing, we're now going to install it. Because hopefully that'll rebuild the kernel headers. Yes. Okay. And now we're going to power off the machine. Actually, we'll do that. I'm going to go into the settings like we did before. Just click on General. Go to Advanced. I'm going to enable this bidirectional. Enable this bidirectional. Go OK on that. Video or display. Sometimes I have to go back to VBox VGA for it to work, or VBox SVGA. Say OK. Start this up. Remember, we can't go into the 5.9 kernel. We have to go into the 5.6 kernel. Should give us the option here shortly. At some point. And I got a kernel panic. Okay. Didn't give me the option to select the kernel. Went to the 5.9 and it kernel panicked on me, which is to be expected. Because again, 5.9 for some reason does not work on this Oracle at this particular point in time. The next update to Oracle VirtualBox should have the update for that. So by the time you view this, perhaps things are fixed. Now I think I may have missed where it said I was going to do the installation of the VGA full screen. Look at that. Full screen. Hit the Control F to get the full screen. So with Fedora, like I said, there are some benefits in the installation as well as some little kinks and quirks that you need to weed out. So the benefits, of course, are the fact that it automatically installs the VirtualBox editions for you. The downside is that because they update their kernel so often, VirtualBox doesn't have enough time to continually update. So you may have to just not update your machine when you install it. Find out what version is able to be installed on that particular VirtualBox, and then update whenever the next version comes out. Only because of the fact, like I said, the newest kernels aren't always built into, or the support for virtualization of those kernels is not built into VirtualBox all the time. That's the only downside really to VirtualBox. As is this. This happens to me as well every once in a while. You'll see, okay, never mind. It has come back up. I have with my work machine where it does not, and I have to kill the GNOME process by hitting Control-Alt-F3, logging in manually. Oh. It's not going to work. Right, so I would do a PS, EF, grep, GNOME, grep, Matthew. So I'd have to kill the this process called up here. Actually, you won't see it because my mouse disappears. But I'd have to kill 15.4.9. I'd have to kill that, and that would allow me to get back into the system on my regular machine. So there are definitely a lot of things to do. If you don't know about this console, don't worry about that. We're going to be going back to that in another video. There we go. We'll be going. I'm actually going to be doing the next video I do coming up in the new year will be Bash. I'll be looking at doing some basic Bash commands. Something just happened to my screen. It logged me out. So we're going to log back in here. All right. So like I said, for those of you with more beefier machines, those with at least 6-core CPUs, 16 to 32 gigs of RAM, Fedora is absolutely amazing as a workstation. Give it a little few minutes to refresh. I'm running low on memory on my machine. I should have 32 in there, and by the new year I will. I already have the pack for it. I just haven't installed it yet. But yeah, so the next edition I'm going to do, and this is, it crashed. Yeah, I can't even get back to my prompt. So again, Fedora Core is a little finicky. Let me just quickly go down here, hit that. It says it's running. It does show the preview that it does have something there, but Wow. This normally does not happen. Again, Fedora Core can be very finicky. I leave this one up to you if you want to install it. I've gone through some of the things that can happen with the install of it. But for those of you who are a little bit more advanced and want something a little bit different than Ubuntu, Fedora Core is definitely one of the ones I'd suggest. But again, going back a few versions, maybe to 31 or 32 as opposed to 33 is the best bet. But other than that, I hope you liked the video. I hope you liked the fact that we did install a couple different operating systems. This one has crashed on me. I am going to quickly shut down the machine. That may not work. Oops, no. Yeah, it's done. It's done on me here. So let me just quickly go to I'm just trying to find where it is that I can actually force shut down. Close. Power off. There we go. Okay, so again, I hope you enjoyed the video. Fedora, again, is a little bit complex. So install at your own risk. There are some kinks to it. Once it is installed, once it is working, it is an absolutely awesome operating system. Again, I use it every day for my work. But for those of you who are just beginners, I would recommend definitely Ubuntu, Xubuntu, or Kubuntu, depending on which one you like. Again, if you're coming from Windows, Kubuntu is probably going to be the best for you because it has the same type of interface. If you're coming from a Mac, Ubuntu or Xubuntu are very similar to that as well. I just prefer myself, I prefer Xubuntu when it comes to the Ubuntu. But for business, I do prefer Fedora. So if you liked the video, please hit and like and subscribe. And I will see you in the new year when I start doing some tutorials in basic Bash, as well as more advanced Bash for those who wish to go a little bit further with it. And for those who don't understand, Bash is that console that I brought up where I ran the commands to install an update, where I typed in sudo apt update, sudo apt upgrade, as well as sudo dnf update for Fedora. That's the console, that's Bash, and that is what I'll be putting together a video for the new year. All right, thank you very much for staying this long, drinking 8 coffees if you stayed for the full video. You're probably pretty wired. This has been a long video, longer than normal, but thank you very much for sticking around. Have yourselves a wonderful day, evening, afternoon, and I'll see you in the next video.